In the news this morning, a stiff sentence in the trial of accused hijacker Mohammed Hamadi. Student protests in China grow to enormous proportions, and the man at the helm denies the skipper of the Exxon Valdez was drunk. In sports, Phoenix wins their series against Golden State, and the Knicks hang on against the Bulls. Another day of severe weather and possible flooding in the nation's midsection, and Alan Abelson looks at a legal decision that makes it even tougher to sue one's broker. I'm Deborah Norville, and today is Wednesday, May 17th.
This is NBC News at Sunrise with Deborah Norville.
Good morning. The story from Beijing this morning is not the conclusion of the first Soviet-Chinese summit in a generation, or that for the first time in 30 years, the world's two biggest communist countries have agreed to normalize relations. Instead, the big story is the huge demonstrations for democracy in the heart of the Chinese capital, which have now grown to at least 1 million people today and have turned the Soviet-Chinese meetings into a summit under siege. The latest now from NBC's Keith Miller in Beijing.
At no time since China became communist has the government allowed dissent to reach such threatening proportions. Hundreds of thousands of people packed into Tiananmen Square to support hunger strikers demanding a dialogue with the government. Exhausted and sick from 5 days without food, some 300 students have been hospitalized. But there are thousands more to take their place. Across the square in the Great Hall of the People, visiting Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev assumed his role as patron of socialist reform. It is difficult, he said, and not always smooth, but radical reform is necessary. It was a clear message to his host that greater political reform must accompany the economic changes in China. If striking students were looking for a lesson, Gorbachev gave them one. It takes time, he said, seeming to plead for patience from the people. Instead, the protest has spread to more than half a dozen cities across the country. Clearly, there is a domestic political crisis in China, and any resolution will require major concessions from the government or suffocating repression. Keith Miller, NBC News, Beijing.
And Keith Miller is not far from Tiananmen Square in Beijing this morning. Keith, what kinds of changes beyond the comments that Mikhail Gorbachev has made has this protest had on the Soviet-Chinese summit?
Well, it certainly overshadowed it and diminished its importance as well. The Chinese leadership is highly embarrassed at this sign of civil unrest, a lot of it occurring because of reform. So there's a lot of embarrassment and also a lot of confusion over how to end it. We're told there's a leadership struggle now within the Communist Party of China, and how that comes out will determine how this ends in Tiananmen Square and beyond.
Has there been any talk of any kind of forceful put down of this protest, perhaps after Mr. Gorbachev leaves China?
There has not been talk of it, but certainly there's always speculation. This is a communist country that has never allowed dissent before. It has arrested people, jailed people, deported them, and executed them for having views other than that of the government. So far, it has been highly restrained in its dealings with the protesters, and presumably it will remain that way at least until Gorbachev leaves the country.
All right. Keith Miller in Beijing. Thank you. And while Soviet-Chinese relations are warming, there is a definite chill to Moscow's relations with this country, at least when it comes to guns for Nicaragua. Mikhail Gorbachev says that he is going to stop arming the Sandinistas. But American officials are skeptical, claiming they detect no slowdown in military shipments. The Nicaraguans are skeptical as well. Spokesmen in Managua say they've heard nothing about a cutoff in Soviet military aid. American dependents that are leaving Panama say the situation in that country is bad and getting worse. The first plane load of Americans, mostly wives and children of U.S. servicemen in Panama, arrived last night in Charleston, South Carolina. A second flight is scheduled later today. The Defense Department says there is no emergency in Panama. It describes the evacuations as a precautionary measure. In Lebanon this morning, the search is on for 2 West Germans kidnapped yesterday by Muslim gunmen near the port city of Sidon. A third hostage escaped. It is still not clear if there is a connection between these kidnappings and a guilty verdict handed down this morning by a West German court against a Lebanese terrorist charged with the 1985 hijacking of a TWA jet. NBC's Dennis Murphy is in Frankfurt this morning with more on the trial of Mohammed Hamadi. Good morning, Dennis.
Good morning, Deborah. Hamadi got the maximum sentence allowed, life in prison. Guilty of air piracy, guilty of murder. It has been a politically explosive trial. The verdict was handed down in the Frankfurt prison where Hamadi was tried. The 24-year-old Lebanese stood passively behind bulletproof glass as the sentence was read in a courtroom built just for his trial.
So they're about to shoot a passenger. They just shot a passenger.
Hamadi admitted taking part in the hijacking, but denied killing U.S. Navy diver Robert Steedham. Hamadi said his accomplice, still a fugitive, was the murderer. TWA Captain John Testrake and other former hostages testified about Hamadi's brutal beating of passengers. Testrake said Hamadi seemed to enjoy the torture, but no witness could say Hamadi pulled the trigger. The parents of Robert Steedham came to the courtroom this morning for the reading of the sentence. They attended every session of more than 10 months of trial, listening quietly to testimony about their son's agonizing death. Some of the TWA hostages who testified here have expressed concern in the past about making the sentence stick. They don't want Hamadi bartered away in any future hostage deal. Deborah?
Dennis, thank you. Other news this morning, there is more rain in the forecast today for Texas, where parts of the state are already underwater. Gainesville, Texas, about 60 miles north of Dallas, was among the hardest hit. High water swamped streets and forced the evacuation of about 150 houses. Even animals at the local zoo had to scramble to reach higher ground. And in sports news, the team that's made one of the biggest turnarounds in basketball, the Phoenix Suns, moves to the next stage of the NBA playoffs, and a near no-hitter for Pirates rookie Randy Kramer. Sports is next.
If I were going to create the perfect place, I'd start with the north. I would carve out rivers and rolling hills, then ride the moon south and warm the skies with a tropical sun. I would dot the west with little hometowns and fill the east with excitement. Right in the middle, I'd put a great big playground. I would surround it all with water from coast to coast to coast, and I'd give it a name, Florida.
Frisky cats feel so good about the extra nutrition and new healthier formula Friskies, they want to say, thank you.
Dankeschön, darling, Dankeschön.
Cats are saying thanks for the extra vitamins, minerals, energy-producing nutrients, and great taste of new improved Friskies.
Dankeschön, yeah, darling, Dankeschön.
Bring out the Frisky in your cat with new healthier formula Friskies.
Don Crickey's got the morning off. Don Gould is here with the sports and a big win for Phoenix.
Yes, and if you had number 24 in your office pool in Phoenix yesterday, Deborah, that made you a big winner. And coincidentally, so were the Suns. Phoenix ending a fine season for Golden State. 116-104 at home. They've moved into the Western Conference Finals against the Lakers. Good defense by Mark West here in stopping both Mitch Richmond and Larry Smith, but the numbers that really counted were the 24 points apiece for Kevin Johnson, Dan Marley, and Tom Chambers. That triumvirate led the Suns to the land of milk and honey, where they'll try to out-magic Magic in the next series. The Knicks weren't ready to go bye-bye just yet. They extended their series with Chicago by defeating the Bulls 121-114 in New York. Patrick Ewing led the Knicks with 32 points, while Michael Jordan had a game-high 38. Bulls lead that series 3-2 heading back to Chicago Friday night. And tonight, Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Finals in Calgary. The Flames leading the Canadians 1-0. Mike Milbury is the new coach of the Bruins, and the Hartford Whalers harpooned Larry Plew after 17 years with the organization. In baseball, rookie Randy Kramer of the Pirates had a no-hitter with 2 outs in the 8th, but Ron Oster's double into the left field corner put an end to that dream. Still, it was the only Cincinnati hit as Kramer finished with a 5-0 masterpiece. Elsewhere, the Giants slammed the Phillies 13-5. Houston edged St. Louis 8-7. With San Diego 5, Montreal 2, and the Cubs got 4 in the first to beat the Braves 4-3. The Dodgers and Mets were flooded out in New York, and it rained on Kurt Young's parade in Oakland. The A's and Yankees were tied at 1-1 when Steve Balboni delivered a 2-run shot over the left field wall, giving New York a 3-2 victory and handing Clay Parker his first Major League win. Toronto was even more impressive, overcoming a 6-0 deficit and beating Cleveland 7-6. Kansas City knocked off Minnesota 8-1. It was Detroit 9, Chicago 7. And Seattle, Ken Griffey Jr.'s 2-run homer as a pinch hitter in the bottom of the 8th helped the Mariners pass the Brewers 6-5. Milwaukee had a 4-0 lead in that one. And while Baltimore was rained out in Texas, it was nice in Anaheim. The Angels beat the Red Sox 7-2, making it 17 wins in the last 20 games. And finally, Charlie Puleo of the Braves learned yesterday that ye shall reap what ye sows, or throws in this case, getting it right back from Jody Davis. It will hit poor Charlie in the face. And now watch the guy in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. He's obviously head over heels in love with his Oakland A's. That's sports. That's enough.
Now I know I had to have those nets there in those ballparks.
That's good. Good catch.
Thanks, Don. More flooding may be in store for parts of Texas and for the Plain States, and the same is true for the now waterlogged New York area. Joe Whitty's Wednesday weather outlook is next on NBC News at Sunrise.
Now I have more reason to get into hot water.
More moisturizers in Calgon Moisturizing Foam Bath. More moisturizers for soft, smooth skin. More reason to let new Calgon take you away.
This man takes vacations for a living. Don't let him take yours. So don't carry cash. Carry American Express traveler's checks. Don't leave home without them.
You probably noticed I haven't been running all that well lately. Mileage is down, no power. Well, look at this. Could you breathe through this? Hey, if I don't get enough air, you can kiss performance and mileage goodbye. So let's go to Precision Tune. They'll diagnose my problem, tune me up, and replace whatever needs replacing. And it's guaranteed. So take me to Precision Tune. We'll both breathe a lot easier.
Precision Tune. We do more than fix your car. We guarantee it.
Information about asthma, emphysema, and other lung diseases is right at your fingertips. Call the specially trained nurse at Lung Line, a free telephone service of the National Jewish Center for Immunology and Respiratory Medicine in Denver. That's toll-free, 1-800-222-LUNG.
Racers are prepared for danger. The probability is there. You don't even start a race car without your seatbelt on. Without it, I wouldn't even be here. Man, I know what to expect on the track. It's driving with amateurs on the highway that scares me. Drive like a pro. Buckle up.
Former Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos has taken a turn for the worse. Marcos this morning is in the intensive care unit of a Honolulu hospital where he reportedly is in critical condition with pneumonia. Last month, federal prosecutors decided Marcos was too ill to stand trial on charges that he and his wife stole more than $100 million from the Philippine Treasury. Joe Whitty is here with the weather forecast, and it is a soggy one in more than one place in the country.
It certainly is. Welcome back, Deborah.
Thanks,
Good to have you back. Good morning, everyone. Texas is really being pounded by some monster-sized thunderstorms. We've had, over the past 24 hours, 13 tornadoes. Hail 4 inches in diameter hit Shamrock, Texas. And that jet stream pattern over Texas this morning is one perfect for producing more severe thunderstorms and tornadoes. At this hour, tornado watches are posted in the box area shown on the Texas map. East Texas has a high risk later today that severe thunderstorms and tornadoes will move in during the course of the day. So Texas is definitely under the gun today. Keep a sharp weather eye there. Parts of Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Louisiana will also be hit by some strong thunderstorms, so keep a weather eye there. In the Northeast, New York City, one more wet day, more flooding rains. The Great Lakes, the Southwest, beautiful sunny skies, and rains move into what has been a very dry Northwest. That's the national weather. Now here's what's happening in your neighborhood. Well, places like Atlanta, nice, 82 degrees. Miami, hot at 92. Look at Minneapolis, 82 degrees. And Phoenix, up to 86 degrees. And coming up next, a look at possible air travel delays on this stormy Wednesday. Deborah.
All right, Joe, thanks a lot. News continues in just a moment. You're watching NBC News at Sunrise.
I'm Brian Gumbel. Later this morning on Today, an American Geography quiz. Also, Kenny Rogers, Steven Spielberg, and Paul McCartney. That's later this morning on Today.
Super Save on Drugs are getting you ready for summer. We have 2 new exciting diet programs. We have the Cowband 3000 and the REB, the new Russian Diet Energizer Plan. And to help to tan the new you, we have a variety of tanning products. Super Save on Drugs wants you to look your best, and that's a fact. Super Save on Drugs, located in Amory, Aberdeen, Fulton, and Tupelo, all with a personal touch. And remember, all Super Save on Drugs have a convenient drive-through window.
Join us for WTVA News at noon, weekdays at 12.
Here are some of the stories we're watching this Wednesday morning on NBC News at Sunrise. Up to 1 million protesters demonstrate for democracy in Beijing. Gorbachev urges a U.S. troop pullout of Korea. And in business news, the housing starts to dip to a new 6-year low. We'll have details in a couple of minutes. 20 years after it was banned as a suspected carcinogen, cyclamates may be headed back to the market. The FDA says new studies challenge earlier findings which link the artificial sweetener to bladder cancer. A final decision on lifting the ban is not expected until perhaps next year. This morning on America's Vital Signs, the NBC News series on health care, a report on high-tech on dairy farms. This involves the use of a chemical that makes cows more productive, and the approval by the federal government for this product seems almost certain. However, as NBC's Roger O'Neill reports, not everyone is happy about the prospect of drinking what some are calling super milk.
The dairy industry has spent hundreds of millions of dollars to promote the image of milk as fresh from the farm, healthy, and pure.
Ah, the virtues of milk. It does a body good.
But small dairy farmers like John Kinsman, whose family for 6 generations has been milking cows in Wisconsin, say if a new synthetic hormone called BST is allowed to be injected into cows, consumers will revolt.
And I'm concerned about the image of milk. I want the consumers to be happy, to know where the milk is coming from.
4 giant chemical companies are ready to market the growth hormone. Cows produce BST naturally, but the drug tricks their system to give more milk, 10 to 25% more.
We can now produce virtually identical material through a biotechnology process, give this additional BST back to cows, and it makes that cow a more efficient milk producer.
Michigan farmer Ken Nobis has been testing his cows with BST for a year and a half.
We'll definitely use it because it has increased our milk production. We've seen absolutely no detrimental effects.
University research scientists agree the hormone-enhanced milk is no different from regular milk. But will consumers, already skittish about chemicals and synthetics in their food supply, accept synthetically altered milk?
I think the food in a natural state is what we need. It's what our bodies really need. Not the growth hormones, not the antibiotics.
We'd find another source for calcium.
A California yogurt company, Altadena, has already told its farmers it will not use BST milk.
It would probably go against the image that we've tried to portray with consumers, which is the helpful, natural products.
Farm groups say they will urge consumers to boycott milk if the government approves the synthetic hormone. A Washington-based environmental group is ready to lead the boycott with this commercial.
What are they doing to our milk?
Most small dairy farmers are afraid of being squeezed out of the market by the big producers who will use the drug. Dairymen already produce more milk than Americans drink. Even more milk on the market won't bring prices down because the government keeps prices artificially high with subsidies. Farmers like John Kinsman wonder why drugs are needed to produce more milk. The chemical companies say it's progress. Roger O'Neill, NBC News, Madison, Wisconsin.
We'll be back with more news in just a moment. Joe Whitty will have another check of the forecast, including the heat wave through the central part of the country and the storms that are plaguing Texas. And we'll look at what's going on in business news. Alexander Pierce from the Wall Street Journal will check out market activity for us. And Alan Abelson will review a Supreme Court ruling that makes it more difficult for disgruntled investors to sue their brokers. Stay with us. Topping our news this morning, the large protest in communist China's history, the largest ever. On this last day of Soviet leader Mikhail Gorbachev's historic visit, about 1 million workers and students are marching in Beijing for democracy. This demonstration was dominated by workers rather than by the students who've led the month-long campaign for government reform. The evacuation of American dependents from Panama has begun. Nearly 300 American servicemen and their families are back in the United States this morning. As NBC's Kenley Jones reports, they're among the first to take advantage of Washington's offer of immediate evacuation.
The Defense Department hopes to remove at least 3,000 dependents by July 1st. That's the number who have been living outside U.S. military installations, and there is concern for their safety. Most of those who arrived on the first flight said they did not feel their lives were in danger in Panama, but they were glad to be out nevertheless.
I'm glad to be home. I wasn't scared. I was worried. That was all, just worried.
I did have an experience where they stop you randomly and check your car out, and that scared me enough to send me home.
There were no friends of General Noriega in this group.
Well, he's a dangerous man, and he can't control his people.
I just find it hard to believe that one man can make a country go down so bad.
If the situation in Panama should worsen and American lives be endangered, the evacuation of dependents may become mandatory rather than voluntary. Kimberly Jones, NBC News, Charleston, South Carolina.
In Alaska this morning, federal safety officials continue their hearings into the Exxon oil spill. Yesterday, testimony centered on the condition of Captain Joseph Hazelwood, who was not at the helm at the time of the accident. Third mate Gregory Cousins, who was, says Hazelwood did not appear drunk the night the tanker hit the reef. Turning to business news this morning, another decline in housing starts. The Commerce Department reports that the building of new homes fell 2.7% last month. That's the third straight monthly decline in housing starts, which now stand at a 6-year low. Stock prices slipped in moderately active trading yesterday. Dow Jones Industrial Average fell almost 10.5 points to finish at 2,453.45. Standard & Poor's 500 stock index closed fractionally lower at 315.28. Shears and Lehman long-term Treasury bond index rose slightly, but in London this morning, long bonds are down from Tuesday's close in New York. Looking ahead to today's market day, here's the Wall Street Journal's Alexandra Pierce. Morning, Alexandra.
Good morning, Deborah.
Anybody expecting yesterday's decline to keep going today?
There's a possibility that may continue, but there isn't really bearish sentiment. Stocks are trading off the dollar right now, which has been at a 2-year high, which hit a 2-year high 2 days ago, because Japanese investors are buying dollars to buy bonds because they think interest rates may have peaked.
Today is a day we have yet another one of these reports. Today it's the trade deficit that comes out.
We're expecting March trade deficit to be about $10 billion. Any figure different from that is going to shake the stock market.
In the meantime, you mentioned interest rates, and there's been a little bit of a switch already.
Yes, CD rates are at their lowest level in a couple of months. For the first time in 2 months, the 6-month CD is below 9%. Investors can still get about 9.50 if they go through their broker, because brokers are essentially offering high-rate sales on CDs.
Just to get people in the door.
Yes, that's right. And in 6 months, they'll be calling you up and trying to sell you stocks.
Okay, Alexandra, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
The dollar is up in early trading in Europe this morning. Dollar is higher against the Japanese yen, also up against the German mark, and trading higher against the British pound. At 9 o'clock in London, the price of gold was $374 an ounce. That's down $1.50 from yesterday's close in New York. Up next, Alan Abelson with details on a Supreme Court decision that he says does no favors for the disgruntled investor.
What's fair is fair. And frankly, Price Pfister is the fairest faucet of them all. Starting with the fabulous finishes they offer outside, right down to the feat of engineering that's inside. The quality is formidable, thanks to a heart of solid brass. And another fine feature is how affordable it is. So find yourself a Price Pfister, the fabulous faucet with a funny name.
Have you ever wondered what a baggage handler might take on vacation? What everyone should take. Samsonite's glutton for punishment.
There's an enemy in your car's engine, heat. That's why you need the special quality of Pennzoil motor oil. Pennzoil has superior breakdown resistance to protect your engine. Conquer the enemy heat with the world-class protection of Pennzoil.
Señoritas, fajitas. New from Weight Watchers. Que bueno!
If you think being out of the house means being out of touch, you don't know Uniden. I've told you before, this is a great cordless phone.
The financial industry got a little gift from the Supreme Court yesterday. The High Court ruled that investors may not sue their brokers in court if they've signed an arbitration agreement. Most brokerage agreements have in very fine print a clause in which an investor promises to submit to arbitration in a dispute. Our business reporter, Barron's editor Alan Abelson, says Wall Street is cheering on this one. Good morning.
Good morning, Deborah.
What's this ruling tell investors?
Well, it tells investors that they don't have legal recourse, really. They've got to play by the rules that the securities industry set up, which is an arbitration procedure, usually a panel of 3 or 5 people. You choose one, I choose one, and presumably there's one guy who's supposed to be completely impartial.
Apparently there's some investors out there who think they've got a better shot if they go to court.
Yeah, I think so, especially, Deborah, it used to be if you really had a claim for securities fraud, you could take it to court. But unfortunately, this Supreme Court ruling just throws that out. You know, there was a ruling in 1953 by an earlier court which said you could sue for securities fraud. Apparently, this particular court feels arbitration is good enough.
What the court is saying is that, hey, you investors signed this agreement, you've got to stick to your word.
That's pretty much it. And of course, most people don't even read what they sign. And they're also bewildered, I think, by an arbitration procedure. It isn't like a courtroom. A lot of them don't even know enough to take a lawyer, which they certainly should.
And if you take a lawyer, well, how do you find a lawyer, first of all, to handle one of these for you?
The main thing is, you know, most people have in-laws, I suppose, who can't find cases otherwise. But actually, you should find a lawyer, and you should, if you can, get him to take it on contingency so that he gets a cut of whatever he gets for you.
But generally, that is not a great amount.
That is not a great amount, and you have to remember the securities industry hires very high-powered Wall Street law firms. So I think the deck is a little stacked. They've introduced some new rules that are supposed to make it fairer, but I don't think people are going to feel that it's a fair system.
Obviously, nobody gets into a relationship with a broker with the intention that down the road I'm going to have to sue you.
No.
But could you enter an agreement without signing the clause about arbitration? Is there a brokerage firm anywhere that'll do that?
If you can find them, I'd love to see them, and so would a lot of other people. No broker in his right mind, and of course that's arguable how many are, but no broker in his right mind is going to, I think, allow that kind of relationship to exist.
And Alan, what is your phone number so all these brokers can call you?
I'll be out of town for the rest of the month.
Okay, well, you will be here tomorrow. We'll talk to you then. Thanks, Alan. Joe Woody's back with us with another check of the weather and a look at those big storms down in Texas. Joe?
Travel in Texas is going to be tough today. Tornado watches are posted for nearly half the state, and I expect more storms today. Expect lots of airport delays in Texas as pilots and air controllers try to avoid those potential severe downbursts created by these storms. In the Northeast, we have rain delays likely at New York and Boston, especially this morning. The Great Lakes will be sunny, but in the Northwest, rain moves into Seattle this afternoon. San Francisco and Los Angeles will see afternoon sun with highs in the 70s. Denver 67 with a risk of showers, and travel with care in Texas. Deborah.
All right, Joe, thanks a lot. And that's our latest look at news from NBC News at Sunrise for a Wednesday morning. I'm Deborah Norville. Thank you for watching. And my thanks also to Mary Alice Williams and John Palmer, who sat in for me while I was away on assignment. Appreciate it. We hope you have a good day and that you'll be with us again tomorrow morning. We'll see you then.